Chapter 1, USB4. We start with a strict promise you can test at home: map lanes, link rates, and feature flags to predictable outcomes, not vibes or logos. Picture the moment that brought you here. Your new Ultrabook proudly says USB4 and even hints at headline numbers. You plug in a dock, spin up a backup to an external NVMe drive, and the 4K high refresh monitor on the same cable flickers, or the copy crawls. That confusion is baked into how USB4 works. USB4 is a tunneling layer that can carry multiple kinds of traffic: classic USB packets, PCI, Peripheral Component Interconnect Express, for storage and capture cards, and native DisplayPort video over the same USB-C connector. Tunneling is great because it lets one physical link behave like several virtual links at once. It's also where the gotchas live, because every virtual link wants time on the same physical lanes. A lane, in this context, is a differential pair of wires that carry symbols. The total bandwidth you actually get is the number of lanes multiplied by the symbol rate, the link rate, those lanes can train to. When a host advertises modern USB4 capabilities, but is physically wired with fewer high-speed lanes, or the firmware allocates those lanes differently under load, the results won't match the marketing. That's why alternate mode, or alt mode, matters. Alt mode is the ability to send native DisplayPort signals over USB-C. When alt mode is active, some of the same high-speed lanes that would have carried USB or PCIe traffic are reassigned to the display pipeline. On a port wired with only 2 superspeed lanes, running alt mode while also moving heavy data can mimic the symptoms of a slower port, even though the logo looks cutting edge. Receipts are straightforward and visual. The USB Implementers Forum's base specifications describe the negotiation and tunneling model. Vendor white papers and reputable teardowns show the host controller, the retimers that reshape and redrive the signal for longer runs, and the actual lane wiring on motherboards. Most USB-C cables include an E-marker, a tiny chip that announces the cable's capabilities during the USB power delivery handshake. That E-marker is how the system decides how many lanes and how much current it can safely use. If the cable can't support the trained link rate or the required lanes, the host will fall back to a lower mode that may still light the display but starve PCIe tunneling. Mechanics decide the outcome. The host's USB4 controller and firmware decide which flows get priority and which symbol rates each lane trains to during link setup. Active docks include their own retimers and crossbar switches that can maintain signal integrity but also introduce their own scheduling policies. Even the path inside your laptop, how many PCIe lanes feed the USB4 controller, whether those lanes are shared with the internal storage, and which retimers sit between the controller and the Type-C receptacle, can determine whether a second monitor steals just a sliver of bandwidth or half the pipe. Your portable rule for this chapter is simple and verifiable. First, check whether the port exposes PCIe tunneling at all and at what width. Some operating systems can show this in device information panes. Second, confirm whether the same port is expected to drive displays via alt mode simultaneously, because that will reclaim lanes. Third, make sure the cable's E-marker reports the capabilities you expect. If any of those 3 pieces are missing, the final performance will be too. The punchline is not meant to be cynical. A modern sticker is a generational claim, not a guaranteed lane map. Next up, we take the same discipline to Thunderbolt 5 and show where certification ensures a floor and where implementation still shapes the ceiling. Chapter 2, Thunderbolt 5. Thunderbolt enters the story as the stricter sibling with a badge at the door. Certification exists to guarantee interoperability and a set of minimum capabilities across hosts, docks, and devices. That promise is valuable, especially if you're daisy-chaining displays and high-speed storage on the road. But certification can't make 2 different designs behave identically once the pipe fills. Thunderbolt encapsulates PCI and DisplayPort inside a low-latency packet fabric. When a downstream NVMe drive hits its stride through PCI tunneling, it isn't hogging the link, it's fairly consuming the bandwidth the scheduler allocates to data flows. That consumption leaves less headroom for DisplayPort video flows unless the controller prioritizes the display, which some do. The differences you feel between hubs aren't imaginary. Inside a Thunderbolt dock, there's a real topology: a host-facing controller, a set of crossbars and downstream ports, sometimes internal PCI switches, and often retimers to keep high-speed signals healthy. That topology defines buffer sizes, arbitration policies, and how aggressively the dock preserves display integrity when everything is busy. A hub that treats the display as sacred may throttle PCI transfers more quickly. Another that aims for maximal throughput might allow short-term frame drops rather than pause a big copy. Both pass certification, they simply have different priorities. Lane wiring choices on the host side matter too. When the laptop routes a full X4 PCI link into the Thunderbolt controller, high-end storage and capture workflows can breathe. When the wiring is narrower, heavy I/O will saturate earlier, and any remaining headroom for the display is slimmer. Retimer placement can help or hurt. A retimer near the port can extend cable runs, but an extra hop can also add a tiny scheduling cost in marginal conditions. None of this is guesswork if you approach it like a map instead of a mystery. Your practical checks mirror the USB4 discipline, but lean on the badge. Look up the exact controller model in the laptop's technical guide and confirm the PCIe width that feeds it. Make sure the dock you pick uses active signal conditioning and publishes coexistence behavior honestly. Coexistence is the key phrase here. You want to know how the dock behaves with a high refresh display while writing terabytes to an external SSD, not just how it runs each in isolation. If you can't find those notes, treat reviews that show both flows at once as more valuable than peak numbers. Thunderbolt 5 raises the ceiling with more headroom and features designed to keep displays happy even when data is heavy, but the core truth does not change. Certification says this works together, not this works the same under all loads. Keep that distinction in your pocket, and the next chapter, DisplayPort 2.1, will click, because we're about to talk about link rates that sound huge on paper, and yet fall back the moment a weak cable or marginal equalization shows up. Chapter 3, DisplayPort. DisplayPort 2.1 introduced UHBR, short for ultra-high bitrate. The headline idea is simple: crank up the symbol rate per lane, and with 4 lanes, you can drive very demanding display modes. The catch is that headline rates only hold when the entire chain, source, cable, any adapters, and the sink, supports robust signal equalization and passes link training cleanly. Link training is the handshake where the transmitter and receiver agree on voltage swings, pre-emphasis, and equalization settings that keep symbols distinct at speed. If the equalization isn't up to the rate you selected, the link doesn't just look a little worse, it drops to a lower rate entirely. This is why a DP 2.1 cable that passed its short lengths on one rig can fall back on another. The transmitter's drive strength and the receiver's ability to clean up the eye diagram vary by device. When the transmitter can't push hard enough or the receiver can't recover the symbols cleanly through the losses of a longer run, link training steps down to a mode that is stable. You still get a picture, but the available payload for your chosen resolution, refresh rate, bit depth, and chroma format shrinks. The numbers change, but the principle is timeless. Integrity first, speed second. Multi-stream transport, or MST, adds another layer. MST is the mechanism that allows one DisplayPort link to carry multiple display streams, either through daisy chain-capable monitors or via a dock. Think of it as lanes on a highway that can be split between separate exits. It's convenient and it's efficient, but capacity shared is capacity reduced per stream. 2 or 3 high-refresh monitors on one link are possible within limits, yet the scheduler will divide the total budget across them. If you plan to chain a trio of panels, planning the per-stream budget beats finding out the hard way that your favorite mode won't light up when all are connected. Receipts here are concrete. The VESA specifications spell out the lane rates and the training algorithm. Test matrices from reputable labs show which cables consistently hold higher modes over length. Teardowns reveal where vendors saved money on transmit power or skipped a retimer that could have maintained margin. Many GPUs and monitors expose a diagnostics page that reports the trained rate and lane count. That readout is your compass when reality and expectation diverge. With that readout, you can change one variable at a time, cable, port, adapter, and watch whether the link rate sticks or drops. Now for the mid-synthesis that ties our first 3 chapters together before we move on. When you treat bandwidth like a budget and lanes like physical lanes on a highway, the same rule predicts outcomes across USB4, Thunderbolt, and DisplayPort. Count the lanes you truly have, verify the link rate they actually train to, and then respect how the fabric divides that budget between data and displays. Do that, and the vast majority of "why won't this mode work" moments resolve without drama. The theme continues on HDMI, where a familiar version number can hide very different link capabilities. Chapter 4, HDMI. Here's the necessary caveat right up front, because it ruins the party if you learn it after you unbox a TV. The words HDMI 2.1 do not guarantee a specific high-speed mode. They describe a family of capabilities. A device can legitimately use that label while only implementing a subset of the highest rate features. Firmware, retimers inside set-top boxes and receivers, and even motherboard lane allocation on small form factor PCs can quietly cap what actually negotiates on the wire. If your requirement is tight, say a high refresh 4K mode with full chroma and deep color, you can't stop at the label. The technical pivot that enabled higher rates on HDMI is the shift from TMDS signaling to FRL, or fixed rate link. FRL uses defined link rate profiles that let the source and sink agree on a specific symbol rate across multiple lanes. That sounds a lot like DisplayPort's world, because at high speeds, physics is an equal opportunity constraint. The source and sink exchange capabilities during EDID, the Extended Display Identification Data handshake. If the sync's EDID does not include the FRL profile your mode requires, the source won't attempt it. If the cable cannot sustain the required symbol rate, the FRL negotiation falls back, and your device may present lower refresh, lighter chroma subsampling, or drop to a different pixel packing scheme to fit the budget. Cables matter here in the most literal way. Ultra-high-speed certification exists because the difference between almost good enough copper and actually clean copper is the difference between a stable image and intermittent artifacts, especially at longer runs. The certification translates to passing tests for the highest FRL profiles with margin, not just lighting a screen on a bench. That's why reputable reviews so often show mystery glitches disappearing when the cable is replaced with a certified one. It isn't magic, it's equalization and eye openings being large enough to decode symbols reliably over distance. Audio adds its own wrinkle. eARC, or Enhanced Audio Return Channel, pairs with modern HDMI ports to return higher fidelity audio from a TV to a soundbar or receiver. On paper, that unlocks immersive formats that ARC could not carry. In practice, TV pass-through firmware sometimes transcodes or strips formats before sending them out, even with eARC present. The connector is capable, the software makes the call. That's why a version number alone can't be your contract. Your inspection list for this chapter flows like a quick lab exercise. Check the TV or monitor's published FRL profiles rather than just its HDMI version. Confirm that your source exposes the needed profile and pixel format in its settings or EDID readout. Choose a certified cable, especially for longer runs, and consider an active retimer if you're pushing placement beyond a couple of meters. The reward for this extra 10 minutes of diligence is a link that behaves predictably, not a weekend of swapping settings until something accidentally sticks. With displays clarified, we can finally talk about the unsung heroes and villains